An American armada cuts through the waters of the Arabian Sea. At the heart of this strike group is one of the mightiest warships in naval history, an aircraft carrier, the USS Enterprise. Her crews work in one of the most dangerous places in the world.
We only have to fail once to fail forever.
Her orders support the ground troops fighting 2 wars, using some of the world's most advanced warplanes and weaponry.
Your heart gets pumping and you know that what you're doing is really important.
Aviators are launched into combat.
It's the most thrilling and the scariest thing I've ever done in my life.
Now, witness the complex choreography that's life on an aircraft carrier. Home to thousands, deployed for months, working non-stop in controlled chaos, day after day, wondering when they'll see home again. A carrier at war, the USS Enterprise. The Enterprise is a floating city, a temporary home to more than 5,500 men and women for almost 7 months on a mission that will span 59,000 miles.
Okay, on to the big picture.
Naval aviators of Squadron VFA 211 gather in their ready room for one of the last briefings of this deployment.
You can plan on me assigning, holding, radio.
Megan Angerman's one of the squadron's pilots.
I grew up flying with my dad when I was little, and then I went through ROTC, and when it came time to choose what I wanted to do in the Navy, I decided that naval aviation would be the best and most exciting job, so here I am.
This is Angerman's first combat tour.
You get excited. My first time in there, I didn't know what to expect. You know, we had taken off from the carrier several times on training missions, but now it's for real, so now you have extra adrenaline and nervousness. We usually have a little bit of time right when the brief is done to just kind of focus and really think about what we're going to go do, make sure that we're not forgetting anything. And a lot of people use the term like you're in your box, you know, you try not to be distracted by other maybe collateral duties that you have. You're getting ready to go fly, and that's what your focus is on.
Just 29 years old, Angerman sits at the controls of one of the most advanced fighters in the world, a $95 million warplane. Loaded with enough firepower to destroy several city blocks.
Bosun, air boss. Are we losing low pressure air? Because we're losing first radio on count 1. Air soup.
Angerman's one of 230 pilots on deck who, when they are flying, live under the scrutiny of the air boss. Ryman Schoaf controls every inch of the flight deck.
I'm the manager of the airport, but all my aircraft carry weapons. We don't have Delta or American here, but we make a bigger boom.
He spent 20 years in the Navy.
In hangar bay, turning starboard, hit a port, turning starboard, hit a port.
During combat flight operations, Schoaf will spend 16 hours a day at his post, here in primary flight control, overseeing the constant preparation of dozens of aircraft.
It is nonstop.
702, airborne.
You know, we'll launch and then we'll catch and we'll launch and we'll catch and we'll launch and we'll catch and we'll do that all day long. And so it's kind of chaos.
Schoaf has 65 assorted aircraft to work with. His first wave can be launched in minutes to hit targets 1,000 miles away. Like Megan Angerman, Ben Bynes is a nugget, a pilot on his first combat deployment. He's a second-generation military aviator. His father served in the Vietnam War.
I've always loved flying. When I was growing up, my dad had a bunch of pictures of his F-4 days. He was a weapons officer, backseat F-4s. for the Jolly Rogers, and he told me about it a little bit.
Bynes trained for nearly 3 years to get his shot on a carrier. Over this deployment, he'll carry out dozens of missions, and none will be routine.
First time going into a combat environment was a little nerve-wracking, mostly because you just don't want to screw it away.
It's a challenge to simply learn your way around the ship. The Enterprise is one of the largest warships in the world. She's nearly 4 football fields long. More than 60 planes can fit below and on the deck. She has 4 catapults to launch planes off the ship, 2 at the bow and 2 at the waist. 4 arresting wires to snare planes when they land cross the deck, which is just 250 feet wide. The ingenious technology that allows the Enterprise to launch and land planes took nearly a century to perfect. The first flight off a ship was all the way back in 1910. Just over a decade later, the coal carrier Jupiter was converted to the first aircraft carrier. The first carrier USS Enterprise was launched in 1936. Her scout planes made the initial contact with Japanese bombers bound for Pearl Harbor. As the Pacific Fleet's destroyers fought the Japanese Navy for 3.5 years, the Enterprise was in all but 2 of the major actions in the war. Dawn, May 15th, 1945. An on-deck camera captures disaster. A kamikaze smashes through the flight deck near the stern of the ship. 12 men are killed. 72 are wounded. Crews battle the resulting fire successfully, but she's so damaged, she was removed from the war. Over the next few months, the Enterprise sails back to the States, taking on board thousands of wounded servicemen. They stand on her deck as she sails into New York Harbor. 20 years after her launch, this Enterprise had become obsolete. A warship critical in the U.S. destruction of the Japanese Navy in World War II was slowly dismantled for scrap in the late 1950s. A new, more advanced Enterprise was already on the drawing board.
What I tell all the new sailors when they check in is they will go to different ships and possibly even different carriers, but none of them will have the history or the name that Enterprise has. The first 2 Enterprises weren't even named USS, they were just Enterprise, because the first one we swiped from the British in 1775 before there was a country, so it was just Enterprise, and that proud tradition has continued on.
This Enterprise gives ground commanders tremendous power without having to build and supply air bases. From deep in the Arabian Sea, aircraft can launch and hit targets within roughly a 1,000-mile radius.
We provide power projection ashore anywhere in the world, don't require basing rights.
Known affectionately as the Big E, work began on the Enterprise a generation ago. She was the first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier built for the U.S. Navy. 8 reactors generate an enormous amount of energy. The average race car has the equivalent of 700 horsepower. The Enterprise, 280,000. She has 4 propellers, each weighing 32 tons. Christened in September of 1960, the Enterprise has borne generations of sailors and naval aviators into conflicts around the world. Her crews sailed in the blockade of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Her sailors served tours throughout America's war in Vietnam.
The mighty aircraft carrier Enterprise becomes the first nuclear-powered ship ever to enter combat. Off the coast of Vietnam, the Big E launches her Phantom jets against Viet Cong hideouts. 4 planes can be catapulted from the Enterprise at one time.
Now, the Enterprise has sailed from her home port of Norfolk, Virginia, to the Arabian Sea. Her crews have been ordered into combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. Megan Angerman has been away from her husband Will for nearly 7 months.
I think the hardest part about being out here for so long is just being away from family and friends. You know, missing the little things about home.
For each deployment, the Enterprise carries 8 squadrons of aircraft. The E-2C Hawkeyes conduct airborne traffic control, detecting hostile aircraft. The Viking, designed to attack and destroy enemy submarines, now serves as the Air Wing's aerial refueler. The Prowlers are radar killers. They knock out the enemy's eyes in combat. There are 4 squadrons of FA-18s on board this cruise. 3 of the squadrons are comprised of Hornets, fighter bombers, lethal in a dogfight, deadly in the support of ground troops. The 4th unit of FA-18s is the Checkmates. They fly the Super Hornet. While it resembles the Hornet, it is essentially an entirely new aircraft with greater range and versatility against a wider array of threats. For the aviators and the rest of the crew on deck, the final squadron might be the most important. The Dragon Slayers fly the Seahawk helicopter and have 2 roles. 1, they hunt and kill enemy submarines. And 2, search and rescue. Should any Enterprise crew end up in the ocean, these crews are responsible for saving their lives.
Being able to fly and swim at the same time, you really don't get too many jobs where you can do that. We fly around and do missions and do turf flights, and then turn around the next day where we're jumping out of a helicopter doing star jumps or casting or fast roping SEALs or ELD onto decks on a small ship so they can take them over. So it just depends on what we're doing.
Rescue swimmers like Brent Blackwell are highly regarded by the air crews.
If something did happen and they ejected or their plane went down, we would be right there behind them, jumping in the water, hovering right over them to get them out of harm's way, give them medical attention.
Deck, we're 2/3 bell, 21 knots of wind, coming down to about...
The flight deck is an extremely dangerous place.
Well, we got a little less than 4.5 acres of deck space that I have to work with. And in that 4.5 acres, I'll have as many as 43 aircraft. They will be within a matter of inches from one aircraft to the next. They'll have 20,000 pounds of fuel on board. They'll have 500 pounders, 1,000 pounders, 2,000 pound bombs. So it is a lot of explosive material in a very, very small area, and we don't want them to explode on the flight deck. Well, the 2 most dangerous times, of course, is when we're launching and then we're recovering. For instance, when we're shooting aircraft, launching aircraft, out here on the waist. I mean, the people that are making that happen are within 10 feet of the airplane. And the airplane is wide open, and it's full of fuel, and it's full of ordnance. And when that airplane launches, it goes right over their head.
It is an environment where the threat of a catastrophic accident looms day and night.
It's ugly because it's not like the Air Force. You don't have 10,000 feet of runway and your maintenance people are in the 2 buildings over. I mean, they're right there on the foul line. So it's the proximity of being close to the aircraft is what makes it so different.
Because of the constant pace and countless ways one can be maimed or killed, a mistake has fatal implications.
Everybody's job here is important. And then if you don't show up and don't do your job correctly that particular day, then no kidding, in this business, somebody can die. What I tell the folks that work for me is that we have the most unique job of anyone in the world because we only have to fail once to fail forever.
Throughout her history, accidents have claimed many. But there is one day when the Enterprise faced her most dire threat. One that nearly destroyed her. January 14th, 1969. The Enterprise is 75 nautical miles from Hawaii, bound for the waters off Vietnam. A rocket explodes on the flight deck, igniting a massive fire. Multiple cameras mounted on the tower and on the deck captured the horrific scene as fuel tanks ignited and more warheads exploded. Flames and smoke engulfed the ship. The blasts from 500-pound bombs exploding on the flight deck tore the ship apart down to the waterline. Burning jet fuel spilled down, creating a suffocating inferno above and below deck. In just 20 minutes, more than 340 sailors were injured, many from the flight deck hose teams. 28 men were killed. It is a story told often to those aboard this ship today.
Quite often I stand up here and look out and just try to imagine the whole fantail and engulfed in flames. It was some heroes that day, without a doubt, for sure. So I've got a lot of respect for the air boss that was here that day and what he had to go against. He sat here and watched those people die, and he's asking people to come back out and get on the hoses to put out the fire, pull away the bodies to fight the fire. Well, then there was another explosion, and those people died. So he's up here having to tell people, please get back and fight the fire, because he doesn't want to lose the ship.
Rebuilding the Enterprise so she could return to duty took exactly 51 days. Now, decades later, she's at war once again. Beginning in the early morning, each squadron starts to prep their planes for the day's strike missions. It's an operation that requires hundreds of people working around the clock. The color of their shirt defines their role. Red shirts are the firemen, as well as bomb loaders. Blue shirts maneuver the aircraft in the confined space. Brown shirts are plane captains, responsible for ensuring the plane is ready to fly. Purple shirts, or grapes, have one task: fuel. Green shirts, in addition to endless maintenance duties, work with the yellow shirts, launching and recovering aircraft. The most recognizable yellow shirt is the shooter. Sean McCarthy spends most of his day just a few feet away from the aircraft he launches. This is exactly where he's wanted to be since he was a kid.
Well, like all little boys, I played with G.I. Joes growing up and enjoyed the whole military theme. Used to go to air shows with my grandfather, so I got to see a lot of naval aviation back in California growing up, but now I get to be a part of it.
The shooter is the last person a pilot sees before the jet is launched off the deck.
There's no job on board that's more exciting than being a shooter up topside. The engineers run the plants and everyone else is driving the ship. We're the few guys that are actually on deck that get up close and personal with the jets and actually have a part in making sure that they're ready to go flying. It's just always exciting to have that jet exhaust in your face and the smell of the jet fumes coming up. It's just really exhilarating.
McCarthy drops to the deck to avoid being hit by any ordnance hanging on the wing, which flies directly over him.
It's easy to forget that what we do on a day-to-day basis is not the normal, everyday thing that every other American gets to do, and it's nice to remember that.
Megan Angerman is the lone female fighter pilot in her squadron.
You know, I came in the Navy, there were no female combat aviators. There were no female aviators allowed on the ship. And as my time in the Navy, that has changed. There's been growing pains. You know, I think some were very well publicized, and but every organization in the Navy, as females have come into their organization, have adapted.
The introduction of women into the cockpit of Navy aircraft was controversial from the start.
Wave out power, raise your gear, power. Eject, eject!
The Navy's first female fighter pilot, Kara Hultgreen, was killed in an accident in 1994. The final report attributed the crash to both an engine failure and pilot error. At the time, some people questioned if the accident was linked to her gender. Now, more than a decade after that accident, female aviators like Megan Angerman are commonplace in the Navy.
How's it going?
She's a nugget on her first deployment to a carrier, and according to her skipper, she's a good one.
She actually was, and I don't want to embarrass her, she was the top 5 nugget in the air wing for the entire cruise. In other words, she was the 5th best in landing performance on the aircraft carrier for the whole cruise. So yeah, I'd have to say she's a pretty good nugget.
Angerman doesn't believe her limited experience or her gender makes her any less qualified than her peers.
What are you guys doing?
I don't like to make a big deal about the gender and say I'm the only female pilot in the squadron. I like to think of it as just I'm one of 17 pilots in the squadron.
For the most part, it's a lot of fun. It's like having 30 brothers who pick on you just as much as they pick on each other. So I guess that's not a bad thing, you know. It's fun to be part of their club, I guess. I don't think that I'm any better or any worse than any of the guys, and I just work as hard as I can, and that's all anyone can expect, I think.
There's always still good-natured ribbing going on, and that hasn't changed, whether you have males or females in a squadron. That's almost like a family. So we got brothers and sisters now in the family, not just brothers.
All the teasing, hard work, and time away from home, and Angerman considers herself lucky to be here.
And I think the place that I think about that most is when I'm sitting on the flight deck right before I launch out. And I have a few minutes to just sit and think and look around and see what everyone here on the flight deck is doing and remember that this is a really cool job.
Deployments like this have been underway since Navy strike groups began supporting ground troops fighting in Afghanistan in late 2001 and Iraq in March of 2003. During the invasion of Iraq, 6,500 aircraft blasted off decks of carriers operating in the Persian Gulf. As the ground troops advanced on Baghdad, more and more missions were devoted to close air support. Two weeks into the war, Navy and Marine pilots were flying 1,000 combat missions a day. A furious pace planned and executed by air bosses like Ryman Schoaf.
Heads up in LA, we're stripping that old 3-wire. Heads up, don't let it get ya.
There's not another aircraft carrier that shoots as fast as Enterprise can. There have been periods where we've averaged shooting 4 catapults, 1 aircraft every 28 seconds, which is, to me, just amazes me that you can sit there and watch aircraft come off the flight deck that quick. I mean, that's the average as we're moving along. And if you've got a really good team of the yellow shirts bringing your aircraft up and shooters getting your aircraft off, it's amazing. I mean, it's just like ballet, and it's really fun. I mean, you really get pumped up. We're up here hooping and hollering and yelling.
103 airborne.
They aren't the only ones to appreciate a well-executed rapid launch sequence. During combat, that efficiency is critical to troops on a faraway battlefield.
If someone's shooting at you, then 15 seconds can be a long, long time. So if we are not efficient on a flight deck and we're 15 seconds late, and someone gets shot at 14 seconds after the hour, then it doesn't matter that we're 1 second late at that point, because that person's already dead. So it is a big deal to us that we not only shoot on time every time, but that we shoot as fast as we can.
The pressure the pilots face is much the same, and they rely on routine to ensure readiness. Day after day, they train as if the mission were for real.
The big thing is make sure you're very methodical. We train pretty extensively for all the missions that we go do. What the goal is to treat it like any other mission. Yes, the adrenaline's going to be pumping. Yes, we're delivering live ordnance against an enemy. Bottom line is, what we tried to do is to brief so thoroughly and to be so prepared to do our mission that it really didn't matter whether it was a tanking mission around the ship or it was a combat mission over Afghanistan. The same thing applies. I think it's probably the same whether you're a Nugget air crew or whether you've been doing this for 20 years. Anytime you know that the end use of your sortie is to protect men and women on the ground, you want to do your best. We take our targeting very seriously. We go to great pains to make sure that when we employ a weapon, it's going to the right spot and then it minimizes the collateral damage to the surrounding areas. It's something that we take great pride in, and we train so well and so much that when you are out there doing it for real, it is something that I think we're ready for.
The pilots on the USS Enterprise aren't the only ones who have to stay battle-ready. Because of their ability to dramatically shift fortunes in battle, aircraft carriers have long been a favored target for enemy attack. From the kamikazes of World War II to the devastatingly effective missiles of modern warfare. To counter threats, the Enterprise has a heavily armed mini-fleet sailing alongside her day and night. A billion-dollar cruiser with the Aegis combat system can destroy any airborne threat launched against the group. A frigate equipped with small guns and torpedoes, able to defend the carrier group from enemy missiles. A guided missile destroyer, a staunch defender against airborne threats. Also, an enemy sub-hunter-killer. A supply ship fills out the surface fleet with its critical mission of keeping up the ship's stores of beans and bullets. The last member of the group is one rarely seen, the submarine Alexandria. She's among the swiftest submarines in the world and lethal. She's loaded with dozens of torpedoes and can launch cruise missiles. The Enterprise Strike Group is equipped with the most high-tech weaponry in the world. And yet, day-to-day flight operations are choreographed on what looks like a board game.
Our landing area is our launching area, is our parking area. We only have so much space on the flight deck. We only have so much space in the hangar bay. The Ouija board is what actually shows the space what we have in relation to the aircraft, and we're able to put the aircraft around in different spots on the flight deck to make that happen.
Once on station, training flights give way to combat sorties. Coalition forces generate target designations, a flight plan tailored to those orders.
Are you ready on L4? I'm ready to run L4.
On board the Enterprise, the handler is given a flight plan every day. He and his crew have to have everything in place to execute that plan.
Are you guys ready to move the boat?
Pilots like Ben Bynes fly every day of the week. 5 training missions and 2 combat flights.
This is where the air wing and the ship come together so that we can put the aircraft on with ordnance, with fuel, getting them out there on time and recovering them on time, getting them turned back around so that we can get back in the air and they can meet the mission requirements of the ship that the ship carries out every day.
From an undisclosed location in the Arabian Sea, pilots and aircrew launch in sequence and begin making their way to a designated point in the skies over Afghanistan. Ground controllers will direct pilots to attack certain targets. During flight ops, aircraft are in constant motion across the deck. The din of the catapult defines the rhythm of the day and night on a carrier. The catapult has a shuttle above deck connected to a steam-driven piston below. When the plane is locked onto the shuttle, the pilot goes to full power. Below deck, the steam reaches maximum pressure. The shooter gives the signal. The piston blasts forward, slinging the plane aloft. The catapult can launch a 33-ton Super Hornet from a standstill to 165 miles per hour in less than 300 feet and in just over 2 seconds, subjecting the pilot to 4 Gs.
When we're prepping an aircraft to go flying, we have to take many factors into account. Those are mainly the weight of the aircraft and the amount of wind we have over deck. Those two factors come together to determine how much force we want to use to launch that aircraft for that particular cat shot.
Calculations are confirmed by 3 different crew members before every launch.
Well, as the shooters, we're responsible for balancing the needs of the aircraft against the needs of the equipment in the catapult. If we shoot the catapult too hard, we risk destroying the water brakes or damaging the nose wheel assembly of the aircraft. If we shoot them too light, then we risk putting the pilot in the water, and we don't want to do that.
When we get launched off the carrier, it knocks the wind out of me, it takes my breath away. You can't imagine how fast it is. It pins you to the back of the seat.
Every time I get launched off the front end, it's a new experience. It's not routine. Taking a catapult shot on an aircraft carrier is the best ride that any roller coaster could ever do.
I love the daytime cat shot. It's a lot of fun because right when you come off, you see the water rushing by you and everything. It's just incredibly beautiful up there.
After the rush of takeoff comes the hard work. In flight, Bynes will have to juggle a constant stream of evolving information, from the locations of other aircraft to emergency plans, and ultimately, the target location, which can change up until the very last minute.
So that when and if they do call you to drop something, you can do it right away, first pass, in a very short period of time and do it accurately. That is where most of your attention is drawn. And you'll feel overwhelmed most of the time.
Iraq, when we first got there, they're doing a lot of searching for IEDs, the guys on the ground, convoy escort, thing like that. When we got to Afghanistan, where they actually needed ordnance to come off the airplanes, and that was a really intense experience.
There is obviously a little heightened adrenaline because you are dropping live ordnance on enemy troops, but we're training for those exact same missions. So when we do get to enemy territory, we are very focused and know what our jobs are supposed to be. So it doesn't require a, hey, be careful because we're going to drop ordnance on enemy troops. We know what our target is. We're sure of that. We have clearance to deliver our ordnance. We're sure of that, and we're going to do our job to deliver that ordnance on target.
Being a junior guy and not being totally familiar even with the Hornet itself, and then being put into a situation where you were taking everything you'd learned up till then, plus being introduced to a ton of new stuff right off the bat that you had to be very accurate with. I mean, there isn't a whole lot of room for mistake, and you'd feel horrible if you did make a mistake. That's a lot of responsibility on your back to make sure that you release that weapon in the proper parameters and hit the correct target.
The FA-18E and F models are among the most technologically advanced fighters in the world. The first Super Hornets flew into service in late 1999. The Super Hornet can attack enemy planes with air-to-air AMRAAM and Sidewinder missiles, or drop bombs on enemy troops and targets with an array of laser-guided munitions. Ground troops have come to rely on air power. Every day for 6 weeks, Angerman, her skipper, and the rest of the air wing crews alternated on combat runs all over Afghanistan, flying more than 1,000 miles from the Arabian Sea and over the unforgiving mountainous terrain of Afghanistan. With each passing minute, the threat level rises.
Knowing that you're over enemy territory, you're doing the real thing, it does help you keep you focused a little bit. You've always got it in the back of your mind, like, oh, okay, I don't want to mess this up. You don't want to make mistakes, and sometimes you're just praying that your tanker is there when he's supposed to be there, and if it's not, then you're trying to work backup plans, because you're always thinking about, boy, this would be a really bad place to run out of gas or something,
For a fighter pilot, running out of fuel in the skies of Afghanistan could cost you your life. But so could an aerial refueling. After almost 2 hours en route, the plane has to refuel. It must be done quickly and efficiently, and it challenges the nerves of even the most experienced pilots. For Nuggets, it's gut-wrenching. Pilots edge up to the basket at the end of the fuel line. They need to fly exactly the same speed at a precise altitude to get their probe locked into position.
You brief it as best you can. The people who've done it for a long time try to give you as much wisdom as you can, but then once you find yourself sitting behind the basket just a few feet and you have your probe and you got to fly the probe into the basket, you're the only one who can do that for you. And sometimes can be significantly more stressful than other times, especially when you're low on fuel and it's turbulent and the basket's moving around. It can be very stressful and can be very intense.
Once they're gassed up, pilots and their wingmen move into what is called the stack, a multi-tiered formation of aircraft orbiting and waiting to be called to attack. There are numerous threats they face once they're in country.
Being such a long mission, you're doing a lot of transit time, but the time when you're on station, it's only a small portion of our actual mission. So the biggest concern is that you are ready to do your job for the very specific hour or 2 hours or 3 hours that you're going to be doing it. And so the biggest threat, in my opinion, is not just the weather, but complacency as well.
Add to that the risk of crashing in the rugged mountainous terrain of Afghanistan.
Afghanistan is very mixed terrain. It has plains and it also has very steep mountains. So you have to be very careful. As we like to say, if you hit the ground, that you're going to be killed 100% of the time, all the time.
Compounding that, the enemy Taliban guerrilla forces have some success disrupting communication.
They jam most of the radio frequencies, so that can be fairly frustrating. Sometimes you go the entire flight and you can't talk to your wingman.
The skies over Afghanistan are swarming with military aircraft. Entering the stack, a layered holding pattern where aircraft circle the battlefields at prescribed altitudes, waiting for their orders to attack.
For us in Afghanistan, the biggest threat was running into another coalition aircraft. You have altitude stacks that go just near the surface with your helicopters up to tens of thousands of feet. You're worried about small arms fire, the lucky pot shot that someone might take at you.
All of the threats result in a high stress level, which is not necessarily a bad thing when you're flying a close air support mission, or CAS, attacking enemy positions that are right on top of friendly forces.
Close air support is probably the toughest job that we do. It's also the most important in my mind, because what we are doing is we are providing air support to friendly forces in close proximity to the enemy. So it tests our skills, because what you obviously have to be is the most accurate you can possibly be.
Stress is definitely a good thing. It keeps you alert, and an 8-hour mission's a long mission, and you get a lot of stress when you launch off the front end. And then you truck in for an hour and it's not so stressful, and then you check in with your JTAC, the air commander on the ground, and it's incredibly stressful again, because you want to do really good work for those people down there. So it's peaks and troughs the whole time.
Coping with the ups and downs is easier when Bynes reminds himself why he's here.
It's really a good feeling, like you hopefully did some good for the guys down there. If nothing else, made them feel safer. I can't imagine how much better it must feel knowing that you can just call in a couple Hornets with a bunch of 500-pound bombs and some 20-millimeter cannon, you know, if you got yourself into a situation where you needed it. I like being over there for them.
Though specific mission details remain classified, cockpit video recordings reveal some past targets, enemy buildings, vehicles, even troop formations. After roughly 4 hours airborne, the mission is complete. It's time to fly home.
The flight is not over until after you've landed safely and taxied safely and shut down.
What lies ahead is the most stressful part of naval aviation: landing on an aircraft carrier. By now, the pilot has been sitting in one spot for up to 7 hours.
It takes a lot of focus. The landing area is quite small compared to a runway, and it's moving. Our jets fly at a pretty fast approach speed. The landing area is angled off the axis of the ship, so as the ship is moving forward, creating the wind that is required to land on the ship, the landing area is actually moving sideways a little bit.
Pilots have no room for error, aiming for a landing area that is pitching and rolling with the sea, and is a fraction of the typical commercial airport.
It's the most thrilling and the scariest thing I've ever done in my life.
It's inherently dangerous. It's not a natural thing to do, to throw yourself at a large piece of steel at 150 miles an hour. And then it's incredibly precise. So many things have to work, not just on your side, also, I mean, on the ship side. You know, they have to have it set up properly for you, otherwise it could be catastrophic on that side too. You have a lot of faith, especially in the landing signal officers back there that are there to keep you safe.
LSOs communicate directly with the inbound pilots via radio, keeping them on a precise path, confirming airspeed, altitude, angle of approach. All have to be within the strict parameters to touchdown. Ironically, landing on a carrier requires a pilot to go full power.
You have to go full power because you need to make sure that you will go flying again if you don't catch one of the wires.
If a plane misses all 4 wires that stretch across the deck, the radio crackles with the word bolter. Pilots will once again roar off the deck, as long as they've kept up their speed. Failure to go to full power is deadly. It is the threat of disaster that makes carrier landings a terrifying rush.
My heart starts beating fast, and luckily the adrenaline doesn't take over too much until after I land, and then I can feel my legs shaking a little bit, especially on night traps.
You're coming in, you're concentrating so hard on making sure that you're lined up properly and that you're on glide slope properly, making the right corrections, listen to the LSO, so you're not really, at least I'm not thinking about the fact that I'm about to land on the ship, and then you do, and then it's over.
I wouldn't say there's really a huge sense of relief, just because, you know, we're doing it again tomorrow, and you just kind of always stay in that role. Usually you're just exhausted, and you're like, I'm gonna try to go get some rest before I do it again tomorrow.
Every day we look back at the flight schedule. Yeah, we're happy we got through today. These are the things we need to work on for tomorrow, and these are the things that went really well. We need to capture those and do those again tomorrow. So whether it was combat or not, anytime you're doing carrier aviation, it's a risky business. We try and mitigate that risk through great training and great airplanes and great people working on our airplanes, but it is a risky proposition. So every day, at the end of the day, you look at the flight schedule and it's all complete and all your jets come back. Well, what I like to say is all my people are back home safe. We got all their fingers and toes attached. All my toys are here. It's a good day.
Whether you're a veteran or a nugget, being away from home for so long isn't easy.
I miss my girlfriend a lot, and my friends and my family. I miss the fact that you could just pick up the phone and call somebody. You can't do that out here. There's not a whole lot of downtime because there's always something you can be doing. You're just not always flying. You have ground jobs as well.
Back early.
Every month, tons of supplies are transferred to the ship, from jet fuel to ordnance. The crew consumes nearly 3 million meals and 35,000 gallons of milk during 7 months at sea. There is a certain challenge to passing the time on a long deployment.
It's just like family when you're away from home. Just like family, you get upset with them sometimes, but the next day you forgive them and everything's good again. Basically, you're trusting them with your life. If something happened, they'll be the ones to get you out of it.
As you can see, this is actually Curry. We call him Junior. Petty Officer Curry's rack. One of my friends. It's my rack, and this is AZ 2 Barrios. It's really not that bad. You get used to the small space. Every so often, in the beginning of cruise, you wake up and you bang your head on the top, and you learn not to do that again. We actually have lights and outlets in some of our racks. We usually plug up our DVD players and just watch movies or sleep. Most of the time we're playing Xbox. Or brought that TV from home.
Blackwell's berth has an arresting wire mechanism running across the floor.
This is the number 3 wire that the aircraft actually land on and catch with their hooks. It's actually pretty loud at night. You get used to it though. It's aircraft actually landing on the top of your head, so it gets real loud.
Blackwell and his fellow rescue swimmers have to stay in shape, so they hit the onboard gym often.
Life on the Big E is not that comfortable. You don't have, the things that you have at home, and you're sharing everything, all the spaces, your stateroom, your bathroom, everything. It's loud. There's sounds all the time, whether it's jets taking off or just machinery rooms. We know that we're going to be out there for a long time, so we try to make it as livable as possible.
In all honesty, it doesn't always go great. I mean, there's some days when people are mad at each other, and some days that I didn't do a great job of keeping their spirits up. But when it comes down to it, I think people understand how important the mission is, but and it's hard to leave home, no matter whether it's for 2 weeks or for 6 months or 7 months or whatever it is.
For Geis and the rest of the personnel on the Big E, today is an especially good day. Their tour of duty is done. It's time to go home.
Very excited. Can't wait. A long time running.
I woke up smiling today. I'm just ecstatic to be going home. I can't really imagine what it's going to be like, but I'm very excited to get there.
We're going home!
7 months at sea, more than 8,000 sorties, 2,100 of those into combat. The battle-tested crew of the Enterprise sails for Norfolk.
Our squadron matured as we went on this deployment, and I have a squadron now of seasoned combat aviators. Our young folks were exposed to combat on their very first deployment. They're savvy. They know what they're doing. This next deployment we go on, instead of going on cruise with nuggets, I'm going to have a seasoned ready room ready to go and ready to go back into the action.
You got a lot of hours, you got a lot of experience under your belt. You're by no means proficient at everything, but the day-to-day tasks become much, much easier.
Today is the fly-off. The last day of flight ops for this deployment. And the only day the shooter can wear a toga. All aircraft aboard the Enterprise have to be launched off before the ship sails into port.
Final launch for CAG 1. Last chance to see the money.
With just one more day until they reach Norfolk, Virginia, the entire air wing is sent aloft to return to their bases. The day marks the last for the shooter. It is tradition that the last thing he fires off the Big E is his boots.
Usually your boots are so dilapidated and destroyed from flight deck wear and tear that you're not going to miss them when you leave anyway, so shoot them off, send them to the Davy Jones locker.
The next day, an estimated 10,000 people line the docks. They've been here for hours, waiting on loved ones. Sailors, as they've done for generations, line the deck in their dress uniforms. Shooter Sean McCarthy is among the first sailors off the boat. Waiting are his wife Lisa and daughters Sarah and Mary.
Every time he comes back home after a 6-month deployment, it's like going on a first date all over again. And not many people can say that after almost 10 years of marriage.
One of the greatest days of my life, man. I just missed him so much.
Ben Bine steps ashore to his girlfriend Angela and his mom and dad. Megan Angerman returns to base. Her husband Will hasn't seen her in nearly 7 months.
Pretty excited to see her. Very excited to see her.
For many, the reunions are bittersweet. The Enterprise typically would have as much as 18 months before deploying again. Instead, her crews have been alerted that training for her next deployment begins immediately.
It's a really short turnaround this time. I don't know why, but usually we rotate, but we're actually going back on deployment real soon. So I guess it's part of the job.
We are working up again to go right back out, so it is kind of sad to not be with your spouse, but we'll, enjoy the time that we do have together.
For most of the crew, it's a short week off before returning to the ship to begin the cycle once again.
I tell my guys that there's only 2 things that we're doing. We're either on deployment or we're getting ready to deploy, because everyone pays taxes and we're the insurance.